At InDigital, we know that public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you are on Circle, Patreon, or Facebook. Thank you. And also all of you who are watching, listening, supporting, sharing, all of it. I appreciate you more than you know. I wouldn't be able to do everything that I do if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you so very much. Got a lot of stuff going on as always. It is June 17th right now. June 17th, 2024, and June is flying by. By the time you see this episode or hear this on your favorite podcasting app, wherever you consume your podcast, I don't know what month it'll be. I'm joking. It'll probably be in July, because there's a lot of episodes, a lot of powerful stories, and just good content coming out. And I'm just so excited for you to watch and listen to all of it. So stay tuned for all of it that's coming out. By the time this comes out, I probably will have already gone to the National Lena Conference, which is in Orlando, Florida. Actually, it's in Kissimmee, but it's basically Orlando. And did 2 sessions out there, Imagine Listening, as well as recruitment through the power of storytelling. And it's just always a good time going out there. I've had this partnership with Nina for a long time, since 2013, actually. I've had a partnership with them, as well as the IAD. Still trying to kind of crack that APCO code nationally. And the state ones, good to go with all of those, but still trying to crack the national one. And what I mean by that is the same type of partnership that I have with Nina in the IAD and all of that. So either way, if you were in the sessions, thank you for being there. If you shared a story, thank you so very much. And I just appreciate all of you. So thank you for that. And we are about to get started with this episode. I am excited for my guest today, and her name is Robin, and she is the owner of CrisisIQ. Hello.
What's up?
What's going on? Oh, you threw your arm up. For those who are listening audio right now, you can't see this, but you've got some excellent ink going on right there. Look at that. Hell yeah, man. That's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So is your, and I think it's the same for everyone. The art is, I mean, kind of an expression of your life experience in a way.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
Any of those involve public safety?
No, I don't have a single, you're not going to find a blue or gold line on me. I don't. Most of these are actually like Japanese art.
Oh, I like that.
But I do have like my very first tattoo, which is, put in the camera, which is a little peace sign and a bank.
Very nice.
So,
I like it.
Always
Well
been,
done.
Fighting the power by working for the government.
There you go. Well, I'm excited to have you on. This is gonna be fun. I'm excited to learn more about you. So let's just jump right in. How did you get involved in public safety to begin with?
So I got a job working at a hospital in the ER as a unit secretary,
Hmm.
and all of the techs at the hospital were EMTs. So a lot of them also worked for ambulance companies. One of the girls there got me a job as like a non-emergency dispatcher for like a major ambulance company, but I worked the night shift. I worked 6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Oh,
And Mima does not need to go to dialysis at 1 o'clock in the morning. So that there was nothing for me to do. I hung out. I watched. They had one of those old school, like a box TV on top of a rolling cart that you would see like when you were in high school.
oh, I was just thinking that.
Yeah. And that was like in my office, and they had one VHS tape. And so I would watch Jurassic Park like on repeat and do like almost nothing.
Oh
So,
man.
yeah. So after I eventually got bored of being bored, it was great at first. I started looking into 911 because I was like, oh, I want to go where the action is. And that's where I ended up. Was there for 10 years.
Okay, so let's see. So you start out there in the beginning. And so did you see any like people coming in, like some crazy stuff coming in? Because I mean, at hospitals and everything else, I mean, when you started out there,
Hmm.
what do you feel like some of that stuff prepared you as well for what you were going to be doing in 911?
So I worked at a children's hospital ER,
Mhm.
and it was a trauma hospital too. I think the stuff that prepared me most for working in 911 as a secretary there was having to like scan in the documents from like the assault allegations and stuff like that, and getting to see like mostly like the police side of it.
Yeah.
Of course, there was some medical stuff I picked up when I worked there as well. But like the process of it all and seeing like the cops come in and interview, I felt like that was the most helpful when I went over. But I trust and believe I had no idea what I was doing when I started at 911.
Okay, so I think a lot of us, right? Unless of course, you grow up, right, in
Mm-hmm.
public safety or you've got family members or whichever. But I was the same way. So I didn't have any experience at all when I first
Mm-hmm.
got into 911. The only experience that I had was one of my favorite shows growing up, which was Rescue 911.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, so that's what I had, man. So jumping into and you can attest to this as well. It's a huge eye opener. It's not like what you see on TV. It's not like that show where at the end of almost every single episode, the 911 professional who's taking the calls gets to meet the people that they help.
Mhm.
No, when you get into it, you quickly realize it's not like that. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen. There are a lot of people, there's a lot of stories out there where 911 professionals do meet those callers. They do meet those people, or even in some weird way, they end up going to, let's just say, a friend of mine out of Georgia. She was in dispatch. She ended up going to a restaurant to pick up the food for her crew, and she just happened to meet someone that she took a call for where they had a heart attack and they lived. And
Oh,
they had that,
wow.
yeah, they had that moment. So sometimes it does come full circle, but it doesn't always happen that way.
Mhm.
So for you, when you get into 911, what was it like for you in the beginning? I mean, even the hiring process, like, was there anything that, kind of surprised you at all?
Well, so when I decided I wanted to get into 911, I looked up all of the 911 centers in my area, and I applied for a few that were online, but I was actually living right next door to one, and it was
Oh,
like in a very like affluent area, and I was like, I want to work there. Like, I don't want to work in the trenches. I want to work at fancy 911. And so I went and looked on their website and they weren't hiring. And so I was like, "Pfft." So I printed out the application for police officer and just
mhm.
scratched it out and was like 911, and then just like mailed it old school snail mail to human resources. And I was working my other job, and then like a month later they called me and they were like, "Hey, we got your application." So that worked out. But the hiring process was crazy. It took like 8 months, I think, for me to get hired on. Like, I had to have a bunch of interviews. I had to get my psych, my poly, all that jazz. It was very back and forth. The recruiter at the time, it was a police officer who was doing all of the recruiting for police, fire, and dispatch. And he was scary as shit. And he intimidated every single person, every family member, every boss that he called. And everyone was like, "Why do you want to work there? It sounds awful."
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
It makes me think of and I don't know what you may or may not know about like pro wrestling, but
Mhm.
when I first started dispatching, there was an officer that I worked with. His name was Officer Brimlow, and he looked exactly like Stone Cold Steve Austin. And so he's just like ripped, and he would rip the door open and he would come in and he would look at me. I'm like, oh man, he's about to open a can of whoop ass on me. Like,
No, you gotta think scarier. This guy looks
oh,
just like Nosferatu.
oh, no
Like the
way.
real, like long fingered.
Nosferatu. Yeah.
Yeah, like he was scary and he had this like ominous presence and you could feel it over the phone, especially because
It's
one
a
of
lot of
my
night
old
shift.
yeah, one of my old bosses was just like this sweet Southern belle of a lady, and she was trying to like be her charming, cute as button little self with him, and he was not having it. And she was like, "Please don't go."
Oh
It was
man.
awful. Yeah, he scared everybody. I was like,
So
"What did I sign up for?"
so you end up going through the okay, hold on. Did you end up getting a chance to do a sit along at all? Did you get to go in there like during that hiring process?
I did. I did
Mhm.
my sit along the night before my final interview. Um, and so I went in. I think it was a Thursday night. And it was like fairly busy, but not crazy. And they had me sitting with the supervisor, who is this down chick. She doesn't work there anymore, but she was so cool. And she had been there for like a long time. And we were just chopping it up. She was really funny and just had a good time. And I was so surprised when I was in there, first of all, at the amount of noise, like
Mhm.
dings and machines going off, and the phones had like two different rings at the time for emergency and non-emergency, and everyone's computer was going off, and I was like, okay, it's really noisy in here. I also didn't realize that I didn't even realize that the dispatchers were working like radios. I thought it was just like those were other people and the dispatchers were just answering 911. But at my agency, there you do everything, it's combined. So I was like, okay, this seems like a lot. But she was like, no, you seem smart, you got it. And then she actually gave me some really good advice. She was like, just to let you know, they're gonna lowball you. She's like, make sure you fight for your pay because they're gonna lowball you. And I was
Oh,
like, okay, good to know.
so I have to agree that in a dispatch center, whether it's you sitting in there by yourself or you're in there in a central dispatch where there's a bunch of people, it is definitely sensory overload. I
Yeah.
mean, there's all kinds of sounds going off, and if you're not, I guess, kind of used to, that or anything when you first walk in, it's whoa,
It was like a
especially.
casino, like
Oh
that amount
yes.
of noise.
Yeah, and sometimes you get a jackpot and sometimes you go broke.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay, so you end up going through that. You've got this overload really that's going on and stuff, but how long did that sit along last? Like, were you there for just a couple hours, 4
I think
hours?
I was there for 4 hours. Um, and no really crazy calls happened. It was just kind of like a normal night.
Mhm.
But I was hooked. I thought it looked really challenging. It was really fast paced, and I really liked that. Because my last job had been really boring. So
Right.
I was really into it, and everybody was like, it seemed to be a very like well-oiled machine. It was a lot of vets on that shift, so everyone's just like picking up where the other person left off. Clearly everyone was like spinning plates, but I was like, I'm a good multitasker, which you think you are until you start dispatch.
Right.
That's a whole
Yeah.
other level.
Oh, for sure, especially when you're first sitting there in the beginning and you're like, "Okay, I this is a bit different than I thought," because you're seeing people do basically what you would imagine like an octopus doing, you know,
Yes.
all like you would need tons of arms doing everything, but it's one person and
Mhm.
those 2 arms and they're,
And more
double
eyes
typing.
for all this the 6 screens.
Right. You've got all the monitors. So you're looking all over the place. One ear is listening to, let's just say, for example, you're on a phone call. You're listening to everything within the environment of that call. And the other ear is listening to everything in the environment of what's going on around you. You're still typing. Depending on how close you are to your partners, especially the person on radios, you might be yelling over something really quick while typing in what it is that you're writing so that they can say it on the radio faster.
Mhm.
And when I tell people this, they're just they just
Yeah,
have that
it's
that look.
crazy. It's crazy, and there's no way to really, like, get it across until someone, like, goes in and does a sit along and watches, like, a real pro do it. It's wild, but when you get to the point where you can do it and you can do it really well and it becomes second nature, it's like it's such a good feeling to, like, when you work, like, a crazy event, like a chase or something, and it's just really fast and there's a lot going on, and then you get done and, like, everything went smoothly from the dispatch end, you're just like
Right. You just exactly. The hair whip, the
Yeah.
dusting off the shoulder, you're like, "We did that shit." Like,
Yes, we
"Look at
slayed that.
this." Yes, exactly. So you end up, you start going into training and everything. Were there different phases, or how long did the training last actually?
So I trained for 6 months, and then they put me on my own. And they also moved me to a different shift. So I trained on A squad during the day, and then I got moved to C at night. So when I showed up on C, I was a little baby dum dum dispatcher, and I didn't know anybody. I had never even met anybody on the shift. And that was when I was like to take my first call with no one like listening behind me. So it was very scary. Like did not feel like I had a safety net because I was so close to A squad, and
Mhm.
someone was always keeping an eye on little Robin, but yeah, not over there. It was just like, hey, they said you're signed off, so you're signed off. Get to work.
See, and it's a completely different beast when it's, between day shift and night shift.
Hmm.
And, day shift. I mean, not to say that they're not, crazier calls that happen on day shift, because sometimes there are some pretty gnarly ones that come in on day shift, but a lot of them, depending on where you're at, and, it's usually a lot more like alarm calls or admin calls or, stuff like that, and you're just kinda transferring people if they're around there, or you're telling people, you got to call the sheriff's department or you got to call the city. They're the ones who deal with that, or, however it works. And
Hmm.
then you get to midnight shift and
And
things
it's
are
carnage
nuts.
calls. Yeah.
Right. Yes. Or you've got the full moon, or someone
Yes.
says the word quiet,
Right.
and you're like, no, everything's gonna go to hell. But then, to your point as well, when you are first working with a specific team and you've built that camaraderie and stuff, and then you end up on another team where you don't know anybody, then you're like, okay, now you
Hmm.
have to learn a whole new dynamic and how this team works and how they work as a well-oiled machine.
Hmm.
And
And who should I be asking for help? Like, who is going to be cool if I'm like, hey, I have a question, and who is going to be like, can't you see I'm busy?
Oh, right. Yeah, because in a lot of places, it's still the same way of that eating our young.
Yes.
And that really sucks because every center around has been short staff at one time or another. And especially now, it is super short staff in a lot of places.
Hmm.
We need to fix that part so that people can actually stay.
Yeah, on my first day, I had done something I think I had cleared a warrant and I went to file it away, but my agency covered two separate cities. So there were two separate warrant baskets, and of course they weren't labeled. Why would they be? And so I I went to put it in there, and I was pretty sure it was the one on the right. And there's a dispatcher sitting there, and I was like, "Hey, excuse me." I was like, "I just cleared a this city warrant. It goes in this basket, right?" And he was like, "Did your trainer teach you that?" And I said, "I'm sure she did, but, I just want
Oh,
to make sure." And he's like, "I wonder if she's still awake. Maybe you should call her and ask her." And I was like, "Come on, man, stop giving me a hard time. Just tell me which basket to put this thing in."
so there's playful banter,
Mhm.
going back and forth that you can do with people, especially when they're new, and maybe say something like that, but laugh, at the same
Right.
time, and then just be like, "No, it goes right here," or whatever,
Right.
Like, you can play around with people, but dude, like, why are
Yeah.
you gonna
No,
be a dick? Like,
someone else had to tell me where to put it.
"Oh, he never said anything?"
No, no. And we worked together for a long time, and eventually I ended up being his supervisor, like, way down the road, and I, like, never let him forget how mean to me he was on my first day.
Good for you,
Yeah,
because
and every
man,
time we had a recruit, I was like, "Be nice. Be
right,
nice. We love
because yeah,
her."
because whoever you're not being nice to, you could end up having them as your supervisor later on.
Period.
Oh,
Period.
man. Well, that sucks. And I'm sure, there's a lot of people who've had um, situations, something similar that has happened to. I'm sure someone who's watching this now or listening on audio only is probably like, yep, I know exactly what this person's talking about. Like, I was there.
Mhm.
And so you end up going through some of those shitty times as well, and you're going through because you're learning everything, man. I mean, I think one of the things, and I'm a firm believer of this, is that a lot of us um at some point or another, and this can happen in any profession, not just dispatch, we forget what it was like in the beginning. We
Mhm.
forget what it was like in the beginning to be new. And that's what happens with people eating their young, or like that dude right there. That probably happened to him. And he had been holding that in his chamber, waiting to do the same thing because there's a saying, hurt people, hurt people.
Hurt people, yeah.
And that sucks. I hate that that happened to you, but I feel like it also helped you in a way, not only build a thicker skin, right? But
Mhm.
with other trainees that were coming in later on, as you said, you were able to tell them, like, look, be nice to people. You don't know what they're going through. Also, when people are new, like, we want them to stay.
Mhm.
Of course, you've got, the people who just love that overtime, right? They love it. But you get to a point where you don't love the overtime anymore. And
Oh,
you're like,
yeah.
we I want to live my life as well as do this job that I love.
Right, like,
And
"Please,
you
I
got to get
haven't
to a
seen the
point.
sun in weeks."
Right. Yeah, because you're with those folks more than you're with your family, and I
Mhm.
think that is something that a lot of people, it's hard for them to fathom in the beginning, because I remember being told in the beginning, "Look, there's gonna probably be a lot of shifts that you're working that, you're not gonna get to see your family as much as you would want to, because there's a lot," and I would always say, Nah, it'll be fine." Oh,
Mhm.
no. We were like, roommates for a little while there.
Yeah. Dispatch needs to get away from those 12-hour shifts.
It's something. Yeah, we were working 12 hours when I first started out, dispatching, I first started out in Florida, small single seat PD, and it was 8 hours. Now, you would think there would be a way to basically plan more stuff. No, that doesn't happen, especially with that place because the schedule changed every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks it changed. So it was 6A to 2P, 2P to 10P, and then 10P to 6A. And
I
that
can understand like every 2 months, but like
right.
every 2 weeks, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's a schedule made by someone who does not have to work it.
Well, yeah, and I don't know who did it, but that it was, and there was only 12, like about 12 sworn officers, and that's including the chief, the lieutenant, as well as the sergeant. And then when I moved back home to Southwest Michigan, where I finished off my dispatching career in the county, actually that I grew up in, we had 12-hour shifts. Now, probably 2 or 3 years after I left and went and worked on the private side of 911, they ended up switching and going to 8-hour shifts, the same as the sheriff's department. So they don't do that anymore. But those 12 hours, man, are not fun.
No, I did overnights, 6P to 6A for almost my entire career. And I've been now working my corporate job since August. And oh my gosh, what a different life it is. Being a day walker and getting to go to things, and my work day typically ends at 4, and then I have all these hours where I can do other things, and it's crazy. It's crazy getting off of that schedule.
It is definitely different, but there are some things that remain. And so for me, this next month will be 11 years since I left dispatch to go on my own and work on the private side of 911 and all of that. But the dispatch year remains, and also the sleep schedule still kind of remains. I'm still a night owl because I worked midnights pretty much the whole time, except for one small stint on days, and that was when I got moved up to supervisor, and nobody wanted that day shift, which I was surprised. I thought I was gonna go back to nights, and I was all excited, and they're like, no, you got day shift, because I was the low person on the poll for supervisor. So I was like, all right. And I really didn't like working days. Like, night shift was my jam. That was my thing.
When I was on nights until my very last year there, you couldn't tell me shit about days. I was like, nights for life. This is where all the good stuff happens. I want to be in the middle of it. I want to be in the trenches. Like, I want to do everything that they do on night shift. And our shifts are parallel with the police shifts. We were working with the same cops every night. And the night shifts are where all the young bully boys want to be, and who are out there like getting into stuff and pulling people over and getting into chases and working days. Like, all you do is take alarm calls, car accidents, past events, stuff like that. And then I was like, I want the chaos. I want the cool stuff. So
that adrenaline.
and I was like, I'm never going to days. I'm never going to days. And I used to give people so much shit whenever they would leave nights. And then one day I woke up and it was like a light switch. And I was like, I've got to get off of this night schedule. I can't do it anymore.
It is pretty hard on the body. And a lot of times you're not thinking about it because you're in the thick of it, and you're just going and going and going. And like you said, it happens one day and you're like, well, I need to make a change. And a lot of times too, I always tell people now so that they can learn from my experience, you got to listen to your body, because eventually your body will make you listen. And then you have to fight back. Like, what I mean is, like, you got to figure out what you need to do to help yourself, because I mean, you could be down for a while, and that That's the part that really sucks.
Yeah, for sure.
So going back a little bit here, you end up going off of training or whichever, you're now by yourself. You have that shit happen with that guy. And actually, before I ask this, the agency that you were working for, how many people were on the floor at the time, and how kind of big of the area was it?
It wasn't a huge room, but all of the CADs were like back to back running down the center of the room. And they were kind of high.
Hmm.
So everyone was sitting like down in like their own little bubble. And there were 8 CADs. I think the time that shift that I was working, there was only 4 of us in the room.
Yeah.
And the supervisor sits at CAD 1, which was like right next to the door and where the warrants are. And the rest of us were like way back in the back. So you would be like, you were very far from someone that you needed to talk to. And I missed that old center because they redid it after I had been there for a few years. And I hated our new center. It was so bad. They made it like they got rid of the carpet and put this like vinyl flooring down. So it was really loud in there, like really loud. And then they took away the stanchions between the desks. So you're just sitting like shoulder to shoulder with someone. So if you're next to someone like loud, you're just like putting your hand over your headset trying to hear. And, you had like no privacy. It was just, I hated it. I missed the old shitty center. Like
The tried and true center.
yeah, with the like suspicious stains everywhere. Like I loved that center. It
Oh,
was so good.
and I'm sure you probably had, like every center that I've been to over the years, a chair graveyard, because people
Yes.
don't get rid of their shit, man. Like
No.
there are some diehards. Like we had one chair, like we got tons of chairs, but this one, it had the armrests look like people had been like pulling it, like they
Or
were
like
nervous, or
chewing on it
yeah, or
with their
chewing on it.
teeth.
Yes, it had
Yeah.
like coffee stains. Like this chair should have been burned, and it looked like it had been burned, and was just ready to go, but it kept coming back. It was like that old, what is it? Is it an old like kid's story or nursery rhyme or something like that? It says something like, "And the cat came back the very next day,"
Yeah.
and it is basic. That was the chair. It always came back, and the
We
people
had
wanted it.
in our old shitty awesome center, we
Mhm.
had shitty chairs. And then we went to the new center, they got us like really nice chairs, like several $1,000 a piece chairs. And they were like they were the best chairs. But of course they didn't all, even though they were all the same chair, they
Yeah.
didn't all feel exactly the same. Some of them would recline more than the other ones,
Uh,
but they looked identical, and they were all leather, and there was no way for anyone to chew on the arms but they had one of those like pump balls for like the lumbar support,
oh
like the
yeah, yeah.
dangle off the bottom of it. And so I took my hair tie and like tied it around the one that I liked. So as soon as I walked in, I could walk around the room and I'd be like, "You're in my chair." I'd be like, "Trade chairs with me."
You marked it.
Yeah, I just had to pray that nobody like on the incoming shift had gotten it yet, because I wasn't going to kick one of my people out.
Oh, for sure. Right.
But if
Yeah.
it was someone who was like about to leave, I was like, "Quick, get out of my
Yes.
chair and take the one at my desk."
That's like, someone's favorite pen. Like you don't take a
Mm,
dispatcher's pen, man. Like
no,
so
definitely not.
do you remember any of the earlier calls that you took in your career?
Oh man, I remember my very first call.
Hmm.
Um, well, let me back that up real quick. Let me tell you my favorite call when I was in training.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Please.
So there was this supervisor who was a couple months away from retiring. She was very, very chill. Nothing bothered her at all. And she was training me in non-emergency call taking. Like at the time, the phones that we had differentiated between the two, so you could just train someone on non-emergency calls. Whereas like now, like the phone just rings, whether it's emergency or non. And so it's a mixed bag whenever you answer the phone, the way the phones are at that agency now. So there's no way to like only train non-emergency, which was very helpful. So I don't know. But this lady, the supervisor, she was monitoring from her desk and I'm at my desk. And this lady calls and she's like, hey, I work at a law office. I'm representing this lady in a divorce. Her husband just came up here and he like made a complete scene and like knocked over like the pen jar, and he was very threatening and he left. So he's gone now. So I don't think we're in any danger, but I'd like to make a report about it. And I was like, okay. Well, you know, when you're a baby dispatcher, you don't really know the difference between what's urgent and what's not. Like it takes you a minute to figure out like
Right.
how emergency is this emergency call. And so I was like, hold on just 1 second for me. I put her on hold. I go and I talk to the supervisor and I was like, hey, I was like, is this serious? Should I be like sending people to like check the area for the guy? And she goes, no, this lady just wants to complain. You know, she's like, put it in as whatever, as a past event, and we'll get somebody over there eventually. I said, bet. I came back to my desk. I picked it up. And I was like, you know, hey, sorry about that. So can you give me the guy's description or whatever? And the lady goes, who was that? And I was like, me? Like, what do you mean? And she's like, no, you said you were putting me on hold. And then another lady got on the phone and she said that I'm just looking to complain.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And she was like,
dude.
who was that? And she was like, put that lady on the phone. And I was just like, I did not know what to do. It was so uncomfortable. And so I walked over to the supervisor and who was still listening. And I was just like, and she just shook her head and she gets on the line with the lady. And she's like, I am so sorry. And the lady was like, I understand that you guys deal with like a lot of crazy stuff in your job. She's like, but this was very scary. Like he could have done anything to us. We had nowhere to go. Like this is important. And I think you need to take a look at your empathy because I think you might be losing it. And the supervisor was just like, yes, ma'am. So not only did she get busted, but then she got like the disappointed dad talk from this caller. It was brutal.
Oh, dude. And you know, that is that's a big eye opener as well, too, you know, for someone on the other end to hone in on the empathetic part. Dude, like that. Yeah, you're right. That's like the parent right there.
Yeah.
Oh, no. So
yeah. I didn't even do it and I felt ashamed.
holy shit. Okay, so I have to ask, and for those who are listening right now, you can't see this, but I'm going to explain here. Did you have like the umbilical cord, like when you were training, like there was the two headsets that were connected, or
No, it was just like in our old system. You were able to like both be on the line at the same time if you were sitting at separate desks. Like I could click on to anybody's call in the room and just like start yapping on their call.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yeah, which was so cool. And then of course, when we left our shitty center, in our new center, we got a new phone and we couldn't do that anymore. You had to like park the call, not put it on hold, and then pick up the parked call. Or you had to have your recruit with an umbilical. If we had an umbilical, they were always getting lost, which I think was like an inside job. So then we would be like, my recruit and I would be on two different headsets on two different computers, but I would be like sitting with them at their computer. And if they said something like insane and I needed to immediately be like, no, I would literally have to snatch the headset off their head and be like, don't do that. Like, don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. And that's why I asked too, because a lot of times when you're hooked up to that umbilical cord, there's a little piece that connects them where you can switch to mute or unmute And I
Mhm.
remember a couple times some of the some of the people that I worked with, they would go, "Oh, no," and because they realized they weren't on there, so I was just wondering if that's how that happened, but
No, it's just
oh,
I guess she assumed that when I put the lady on hold, like, the whole call was on hold, but she was not on hold, and she's like, "This lady just wants to complain."
oh, crap, and that's also recorded too. So
Yep.
oh, hell no. Yeah, those are those pucker moments where
Mhm.
you can't do anything but apologize because it's
Right.
not like you can pull it back and swallow it. Nope, your foot it's foot in mouth and now you have to now you have to own it.
Yeah, that was the most embarrassing thing ever until I did my first, like, radio open mic,
Mhm.
and then
What
it was replaced.
what happened? If you don't
Um
mind me asking, if you're okay to share it.
Yeah, sure. I was working the main police radio. Horrifyingly, I had a recruit with me who was cool. He had been my recruit for like a long time. So we would just like, you kind of shit talk at your desk or whatever.
Mhm.
But this officer, who was a good friend of mine, cleared me over to TAC because he had something important to tell me. And so we go over there and he's just like blabbing on. And I'm like, is he expecting me to write this in his report? Like, I had no idea why he was telling me all this junk he was telling me. And so at the end of it, I just said, clear like that. And then I looked at my recruit and I said, what the fuck ever, like that. And Rudy was like, oh, I'm clear on that. Like, it
Oh, man, so it was still open.
was still open. So,
Oh, no.
fortunately, we were on a TAC channel.
Yeah.
So unless someone was like lurking, they probably wouldn't have heard it. But my friend heard it and he was just like, wow, now I know what you really think. I was like, and in front of my recruit too. It could not have been more unprofessional.
Oh, man, and also for those who are watching and listening that don't know what we're talking about tech channel wise, there are a bunch of different channels, and a lot of times if there is extra information that an officer wants to tell you, they'll tell you go to the tech channel, or like for us, we also had a secondary channel. So if like the tech
Hmm.
channel was taken up for like I don't know, like a concert or a drunk driving grant or something that was going on, they would say go to secondary, and you go to secondary and you're like go ahead, 108 or whatever, and they they would start rambling on about
Hmm.
whatever it was. So that's what that channel is, and yeah, there would be a lot of times that people would go to those channels, and you're okay, I'm typing all this in, like, I'm writing this down, like, that's a lot of information.
Yeah, I
Or
was
or
like,
we
why
would
are
tell
you
people,
telling
"Just
me?
call us." Yeah, just call us.
Or just write your report,
Yeah, that too.
you know?
Oh, man. Um, so I have to ask really quick, so you had mentioned, that you had to share a call from when you were in training. Was there another call in the beginning that you were gonna mention as well?
Yeah, my
Oh, okay.
very first call that I took, my first independent call.
Mhm.
So I was on new shift, don't know anybody, sitting in the back of the room, no one even nearby. Um, and I was plugging my headset in and getting ready, and I was so nervous that like my hands were kind of shaking. Because I was like, oh my gosh, like I have no one here to help me. I'm like, is this going to be like a barking dog? Is it going to be an accident? Like, or is it going to be something that I've never even thought to prepare for? And so I was like, and then of course I talk myself down and I'm like, girl, it's going to be some stupid, like the odds of it being something crazy are so small. And so, and it was 6 p.m., maybe like 5:50 p.m. And so I answer the phone and it was this girl. She was in her 20s. She and her boyfriend lived up in my area, and I live like in a suburb of Atlanta.
Mhm.
And so you can take like a kiss and ride where you drop someone off and they take the train into the city and then they come back and you pick them up at the end of the day. So you don't have to like drive all the way down through the traffic to get
Mhm.
to the city center. So that's the deal that they had. So he had dropped her off that morning. She worked in the city all day. She came back up on the train and saw his car parked there, like waiting for her. So she gets in to the passenger seat, looks over, and he's sitting there dead. And he's been dead all day since he dropped her off.
What?
Yes. And he was like 25 and she was like 23.
Dude.
Yes. And so I answer the phone and it's this girl and she's crying, she's very upset, but she's not so hysterical that I can't understand her.
Yeah.
And she's like, my boyfriend is dead. My boyfriend is dead. What do I do? What do I do? And she tells me the story and I'm like, are you sure that he's like beyond any help? And she's like, he's stiff. And his face is completely blue and his eyes are open. And she describes just like this gory, or, or disturbing scene.
Yeah.
And she was just like, and of course I'm dropping the call, but she's like, what do I do? What do I do? Like, what do I do? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, that sounds awful. And I wasn't sure like what to do really, because there wasn't much beyond like, well, let me know, from EMD or whatever. It's just like, if there's anything else we can do for you, let me know. But she was so upset. And so I was like, are you still in the car? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, get out of the car. And I got her out of the car and I was like, shut the door. And I was like, put your back on the door. Don't look. And she was like, okay. And I was like, tell me about your boyfriend, just kind of like buying time until they could get there. But I was like, get away from him. Don't look at him. Just did the best I could. But it was like a very intense first call. And I hung up. And as soon as I hung up, there were lines holding. And I answered my next call. And it was someone complaining about a barking dog. And that's like very much how it went at that agency.
Jeez. That, to be the first call when you're on your own on a shift with people you don't know, dude, I've been saying a lot lately, especially in this course that I teach, that in the beginning for myself as well in 911, if 911 was a gang, I was getting beat in. And sometimes it feels like that. Like, so for this, welcome to dispatch. Like that's your first one. And you're right that for those who are watching and listening, it's up to us to keep that caller calm. And when you've got some time where you're waiting for help to get there, you have to keep the caller calm by continuing to talk or anything. Sometimes they end up saying like, I don't want to say anymore. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to be here with you. I'm don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here with you. However, if another call comes in, I might have to put you on hold. So I'm just letting you know, and you explain that to them and you just continue to talk like you said you were doing. You were asking about the boyfriend and, just kind of continuing the conversation to keep them from really thinking about what is going on at that moment until somebody gets there. And so, and I don't know if you know this or not, but what happened? Like, did he just fall asleep in the car and suffocated, or what
No,
happened?
he had some sort of medical event. Something along the lines of like, popping a clot, where he just instantly like keeled over. But he got out, helped her get onto excuse me, the train, and then got back in his car, sat there for a minute. His phone was like still in his hand. And then he just,
that was it.
And then he sat there in the car all day in the parking lot at the train station and no one noticed. And so she was like, oh, he's back to pick me up, and then hopped right in, looked right at him.
Oh
and
my
like
God.
a little Honda Civic. So you're like sharing an armrest,
Right. Yeah, exactly. And in that area, I mean, Georgia's not like cold. I mean, not a lot. And depending on when it was, like I can't even imagine what it might have smelled like already in there, just all of it, the whole situation in general for that person, but also for you, for that being your first call and everything. Was there, I mean, it's this is going to sound bad saying it this way, but it wasn't a like a huge incident where there would be like a debriefing type thing, but was there anyone who you were able to talk to? Well, no, because you said you went right to the next one. And it was a barking dog. And a lot of times too, like you finish a call like that where it's just nuts, right? And
Mhm.
just the whole situation in general, and then you go to a barking dog and you're helping the person, but in the back of your mind, you're like, "You have no idea
Right.
what I just took right now."
Mhm.
And that's a tough dynamic as well to navigate.
Yeah, I think that's one of, like, the hardest parts of 911 when you do it long term. It's just that constant even though, like, the longer you do it, the more comfortable you are, like, I think I'd probably worked there 2 years, maybe right around 2 years
Mhm.
before I stopped, like, caring that the phone was ringing. Like, I wasn't worried that it was gonna be something on the other line I couldn't handle. That was, like, right around my 2-year mark that I got there, like, confidence-wise.
Yeah, you're pretty much dialed in, you know?
Yeah.
Like, between that 2 and 3-year mark in there,
Mhm.
you're dialed in, and like you said, you've got that added confidence or whatever, you're like, "Let's do
Mhm.
this."
Yeah, but, like, long term, having to, like even if you don't feel that, like, "Oh, I'm about to be surprised," like, even if you're not registering that you're feeling that, your body is still feeling it whenever you answer those calls,
Yeah.
and that can just wear you down, like, long term, and then having, like, really crazy calls and then really dumb calls or, getting, like, berated by someone on 911, especially if it's, like, something that's sad.
Yeah.
Like I had to a guy called in that his neighbor had passed away and he was really upset. And I was like, "Do you think he's beyond any help?" And he was like, "Well, I don't know." And I was like, "Okay, well then we're going to do CPR." And I'm like, I need you to get him onto the floor." And so he gets the guy onto the floor and as he does, he's like, "Oh god, he's stiff and like there's flies and blah 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 blah." And I was like, "Sir, I know you want to help your friend, but unfortunately, there's nothing more you can do for him. He's passed on." And the guy was like, "So you just had me drag him onto the floor like a piece of garbage?" And he's like, "Are you stupid? You shouldn't be doing this job." And was just cussing me up and down, telling me what a terrible person I was, telling me he was going to haunt me one day. Just
Holy
really
crap.
going in, yeah. And I didn't want to hang up with him because of the situation. So I just had to sit there and say, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." I didn't try to like take up for myself. I was just like, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And then the police who were there on scene, one of them called me and was like, "Hey, this guy out here asked us to apologize to you." I was like, "It's okay. He was having a bad day."
Yeah, I think that's something too that a lot of people don't understand is the amount of folks who go off on us when
Mhm.
we're taking certain calls, but also on our side, um, we just have to realize like people aren't calling 911 because they're having a good day. You know,
Right.
they're not calling because they just want to be like, "Hey, how's it going?" I just wanted to say hello.
Mhm.
And that's it. No, you've got shit like that that's happening, and then, once you give instruction and it doesn't go the way those folks, are hoping that it goes or whichever, they end up going off on you. But,
Mhm.
that's where we have to just keep in our minds, like, they're going through some shit. This was their friend, and sometimes you just gotta kinda take it. But
Yeah.
also awesome, though, that person realized what they had done and told the officers to apologize. That doesn't always happen.
Mm-mm. No, that very rarely. That might have been the only time that ever happened in my 10 years there that someone asked an officer to apologize to me. But I mean, I felt so bad for the guy. I knew that what he was seeing must have been so traumatizing. Um, and I was just like, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Like, we had to I asked, you weren't sure. That was the only way to be sure,
Yeah.
but
That's for sure, yeah, and sometimes you gotta go through those moments to do that, because, there might be that moment that something doesn't happen, and, you possibly, could have helped that person. You don't know. You have to basically exhaust all your resources and
mhm,
options, when you're going through a lot of that stuff. And, it might put someone in a situation that they never dreamed of being in, but also You're just trying to help people out, man. And it's a hard thing. So, you go through your 10 years, you've got all of these different calls, all this experience, and then you end up transitioning out. And
Hmm.
now you're the owner of Crisis IQ. Please tell
Yeah.
me about this. Tell me about Crisis IQ. Where did it come from? What was the motivation, inspiration, all of that, please.
So I left dispatch mostly because I was just over the schedule. It's never off my list. I've only been gone since August.
Mhm.
So, who knows if I'll end up back on the floor or as a training coordinator or something someday. But I needed to do something different for a while. So I got a job as a corporate trainer. So I teach software to clients, which is really cool. My job lets me work from home, like, you know, sometimes 5 days a week. Sometimes I have to go into the office like up to twice.
Mhm.
And they're really chill. It's tech, so everybody's like really liberal and chill and laid back and all that jazz. Um, but when I left, I was like, man, I have so much like experience and stuff that I do not want to leave behind. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want it to go nowhere. It just feels too important. And I love training. After I was just a communications officer, I got promoted to being a trainer. And I was a trainer for, I think, like 7 years before I became a supervisor. And even when I was a supervisor, oftentimes we didn't have a trainer on my shift, so I was still training. Um, and I just really enjoy it. So I was like, maybe I can turn this into something. I also had a conversation with some other friends since I've come to the corporate side of life, um, that like I would be helping them with their conflict management. If they were dealing with like a difficult client, I'm like, oh, have you tried like approaching it this way? And they're like, no, I would never even have thought of that. So at Crisis IQ, I have dispatch specific classes. They're not um, certification classes. So, like, I have a 911 supervisor class that's not going to be like different people learn in different ways. Like, here's how, you should find out how your person learns and adjust your style to them. It's like,
The same bullshit.
yeah, it's like the real stuff that I wish someone had told me
Yeah.
when I became a supervisor. Like, how do you professionally tell someone that they stink, like that they smell bad? How do you have those difficult conversations? How do you promote within your shift and deal with those dynamics with your former peers, that you're now supervising? How do you get your people to actually show up to work? How do you get them to stop doing like revenge call outs because she called out last weekend and I got called in? So now I'm going to look at the call schedule and see the next time she's on call and I'm going to call out. Like, how do you stop that kind of stuff?
Mhm.
How do you create like a peaceful ecosystem, stuff like that? And then I have a class for training officers where I give them all of my advice about training, all the things that they should look out for. Like, what do you do when your recruit just bursts into tears? What do you do? What's the appropriate response when your recruit tells you that they had to start anxiety medication because of the training? All of
Mhm.
these things from having so many. I think I had 17 or 18 recruits in a row. So
A lot of experience there.
yeah, lots of experience.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want to keep this going. But then I also have some classes that are geared toward like any industry, but mostly like corporate teams. That's like teaching them, anybody who's customer facing, teaching them conflict management, like 911 strategy. I have a class about becoming more confident. Like, if you're corporate and shy and you're crying in the bathroom and you don't know how to ask for a raise or represent yourself well or get credit for group work and things like that. I have a class on that too, but I really just want to bring like all of that 911 stuff that you learned by fire, so
Yes.
people don't have to like reinvent the wheel, like I want to, like, let me help you be more resilient in the face of, Karens and whatever else is coming at
Right.
you.
Yes. So I have to ask, as you're telling me this, I love everything that I'm hearing. And so what made you want to be a trainer when you were in dispatch? And the reason I ask is because it's always one of two things. Out of all of these episodes and all of these folks that I've spoken to who ended up becoming trainers, is one of two things. Either they had shit trainers and shit training, and they wanted to end that vicious cycle by becoming a trainer themselves and molding that next generation of 911 coming in so that they don't have to go through something like they did, but also using kind of that experience, those stories, all
Mhm.
of that to teach those folks coming in. Or you had great training and great trainers, and it inspired you to continue that good cycle for, again, those who are coming in. Was it either one of those for you, or how did it go?
Um, I'll take option 3.
Okay.
I trained for 6 months, then I got moved to the floor, and then 6 months after that, or almost 6 months after that, there were only 4 of us on the shift. We had a
Mhm.
3-person minimum. And then my supervisor, her husband was going to have some sort of medical procedure, and she was going to have to be out for 5 weeks to like be with him. And there was no trainer on our shift, and the trainer is the backup supervisor at my agency. And so they asked me if I wanted to be the next. Yes, they
You
asked me
just
if I
kinda
wanted
throw
to
it in.
be the next trainer, and I said, no, I have no idea what I'm doing here still. Absolutely not. And they were like, oh, okay, thank you. And then I got a letter in the mail saying, congratulations on your promotion. Yeah.
Oh, no shit.
Yep. Yep. And so it was me. And I think at the time I was like maybe like 24, 25. And then 2 people in their 40s and 50s who had been dispatchers like forever. One of whom was the guy who wouldn't tell me which basket to put my
Oh.
warrant in. Although he and I had like kissed and made up since then, but
Uh,
yeah, it was crazy. And then I was like in charge. And so that was wild because I was like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? So for a long time as a trainer, I was just being like a backup supervisor. I didn't have a recruit.
mhm.
So I was like, hey, more money for doing the same thing I was doing before. But then as soon as I started getting recruits, I really enjoyed it because I'm very organized. I have OCD. So I'm very organized. I have a very good memory. And I like to create things. And there was no like training packet. Like there were videos that our recruits had to watch, but then there was nothing that was universal across the shifts that everybody used. No like handouts or tests or anything like that. So it was just like you can do whatever you want. So I just took the lessons, good and bad, that I learned from my trainers, and then the stuff that I felt should have been in there or would have helped me when I was like new. Like little stuff. Nobody ever showed me a warrant and was like, this is a warrant and here's how to read it. It was just like, here's a warrant. Here's all the things that you have to put into NCIC. So find those things on the page and then it's just data entry. But like, it would have been helpful for someone to be like, here's the difference between a state warrant and a city warrant, like stuff
Right.
like that would
Yes.
have been nice. So I really enjoyed creating my own training program. And then like, as I was moving forward as a trainer, like tweaking it and like adding to my resources and discovering like what worked and what didn't. And like, then as it went along, like each new recruit was like a challenge. I'm like, okay, how can I figure out how to motivate this person? And if it was someone who was having trouble learning something, I was like, because I knew I'd have to think
A
Like,
challenge.
yes, I knew I'd have to think outside the box. I was like, how am I gonna get, like I had one girl who was really having trouble learning the streets.
Mhm.
She was not good with her north, south, east, west either. Um, but she was like a spooky Halloween loving girl, and it happened to be the fall. And so she came to work one day, and I was like, we're going on a field trip. And I gave her a laptop, and we got in my truck, and I was like, all right, I have plotted points for all of the graveyards in our city. And I was like, I want you to direct me to like each one. And when we get there, we can walk around with a flashlight and see how spooky it is. And she was so excited. And that's what we did for like the whole night.
That is awesome right there. That is thinking outside of the box, but also making it fun.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this is going to sound bad saying it this way, but catering, but in the way of one of her likes,
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's what I mean. Not It's not babying, so people don't take it that way. That's not the way I'm saying it. It's really associating. That
It's
sounds better. It's associating it to their likes.
appealing to her interests,
Right. Yes.
because I
And
don't want to like coerce, her compliance. I want her to want to meet me halfway. Like,
exactly.
it's one thing for me to be like, we're going on a field trip, which I knew that she'd be into anyway.
Mhm.
But like now we're going on a super extra special field trip that's designed just for you. But like,
Right.
but you have to work for it. And she did. She never was so good at reading a map than when she was literally looking at the CAD that we use every day on my laptop and then telling me where to go. And we went and walked around all the cemeteries. So, and
Dude.
I even got one of the cops to hide in one and scare us. So,
Yes. Oh man, Robin, I love that shit. Man, I would
yeah,
have loved to have worked with you. That is awesome.
thank you. I tried really hard. You want everyone to succeed. Um, but like it's fun when you get to try to like overcome those kind of challenges. So that's what I like about training is like each person is like their own puzzle. And I'm like, if you're struggling, it's just because I haven't figured out how your pieces fit together yet. And I like that.
Damn. See, you are the type of trainer that all dispatch centers should have.
And
And that I love that because man,
they
there are
can through CrisisIQ.
oh, there you go. Plug message.
Yeah.
I love that. And so that is an excellent motivation, inspiration too. Once you left, to start this, you said you were doing the corporate training and everything, and you're bringing all these different ideas, and you're doing the same thing now for 911 as well through Crisis IQ. And that is the type of stuff that, because I remember, as much as probably you remember, going to different training sessions, right? And you would have somebody in there who's just basically reading off a screen, and you're
Hmm.
like, or they're throwing a video on there, to add a little, flavor to it, and you're like, okay, well, what are you going to tell us about this?
Hmm.
What I love, and is the way that I teach as well in this communication course that I do, is I pull from my experiences. I pull
Hmm.
from my stories. I love the type of trainers and speakers who give a little piece of themselves so that we can relate on the same level instead of sitting there death by PowerPoint or
Yes.
video or
Yes.
or there are people out there even now that are training on shit that they have never done. They're
Hmm.
basically just pulling stuff off of wherever or taking from other people and copying and trying to speak on it. And you're like, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. Or
Like I
you
want
ask them
to.
questions and they're like, I don't know. You're like, were you
Right. I
not
was
prepared?
really hoping no one would follow up.
Right. Yes.
Um, I do the same thing. Like there were some moments in my training that were just so like someone said something to me that really like rocked my world. Like my friend Julie
Mhm.
Taranchik, she's a stand-up comedian in Atlanta. Shout out Julie. She has
Yeah.
lots of 911 experience. She worked for Clayton County and all around Atlanta. But Julie was training me on the main police radio. And so I was to the point where I had started getting good at it and I needed her help like less and less. And so I was just kind of like confidently cruising through. And our signals and codes, whenever you check on someone, you'd say 89 and they would come back with code 4 if they were fine. And so I 89'd a guy who was on a traffic stop, and he came across kind of like that. And I was like, clear code 4. I put it in. I move about my day. His voice didn't sound different.
Yeah.
And so Julie was sitting next to me and she goes, what did he say? And I was like, he said code 4. And she's like, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah. And she goes, would you bet your life on it? And I was like, yes. And she goes, would you bet his life on it? And I was like, oof.
Oh, man.
That's heavy.
Right.
I'm like, you're so right. And I raised him again. I made him re-advise. But like, I never forgot that. And I was like, I cannot afford to not be like vigilant. I need to be sure, his life is on the line or could be on the line from whether I heard code 4 or.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, man. Well, I could talk to you for hours.
Yes, me too.
This has been an excellent episode. I loved learning more about you, especially what you're doing with CrisisIQ. So for everybody who's watching and listening, how can people find out more about you, CrisisIQ, whether it be social media, website? How can they find out more?
Please come to the website, check it out. It's CrisisIQtraining.com. You can email me, Robin, ROBIN, at CrisisIQtraining.com. We are on Instagram. We are on LinkedIn. We are on Facebook. We are on X. We're everywhere. But definitely come to the website because all that stuff is linked together. So CrisisIQtraining.com. And you can sign up for classes there. And finally, someone is catering to night shift. I have day classes and night classes.
Hell yes.
Says never in all of my 10 years of training was there ever a night class available. And I was like, I've had enough. So every single class I offer a day version and a night version. So
I love that.
Yes.
Very nice. It has been excellent to have you on. And I have one last question for you as we go into the wrap up of this episode. And that is, with all of the knowledge that you have now, all the experience, everything from 911, if you could go back in time to talk to yourself at the beginning of your dispatching career, what would you tell yourself? And it's not to change anything, just to simply give yourself some advice. What would you say to yourself?
I would tell myself that money is not everything. At my agency, we had unlimited OT. Starting from the day that you're checked off, your second day of working can be OT on another shift, even though you're still a baby and you don't know what you're doing. You will burn yourself out, babes. I'm talking directly to the listener. You will burn yourself out. You will make yourself sick. It's not worth it. Yes, you can make, $130,000 in a year. But all that money is not going to be good when you have a mental breakdown because you haven't been sleeping, you haven't been seeing your family. There's always time to make more money. You should be concentrating on learning your job, climbing the ladder, and making that money without having to work OT. That's the real tea.
Damn. Well done, Robin. Hell yes. I love that and agreed. Thank you so much for what you do, what you're doing. And this has been excellent. Thank you very much for being on.
Thank you. I hope I can come back sometime. This has been a blast.
Hell yeah, man. So I will be right back here with you in just one moment. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us. And that is going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media. You can become a supporter of the podcast as well. To do all of this, just simply go to links.co/WTT podcast. And that's links with 2 I's.co/WTT podcast. You'll find everything there. My email, all of the social media, where to follow, the latest episode you can find on there, and you can also find where to purchase Imagine Listening the book, where to pre-order book number 2, and then just scroll right underneath that as well, and you'll find all of the podcast and Dispatch merchandise, and I've added tons of stuff on there. And as always, if you want to be a guest on the show as well, like I mentioned, if you are new to Dispatch, seasoned, or retired, I would love to have you on the show to share your story to literally the world. I've been doing this for over a decade, and it's my passion, man. I love it, and I'm not stopping anytime soon, and I would love to share your story. So let me know. This broadcast has been sponsored by InDigital, a leader Next Gen Core Services. A shout out to subscribers of the podcast as always, but especially all of you who are watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. Thank you so very much. This can be seen on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn Live. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you all in the next one.
You just listened to a Code 7 Network podcast. If you have any questions or would like to be a guest on the show, send an email to wttpodcast@gmail.com.